The rain hammered against the windows of Jiwan's apartment as he fumbled with his keys. His clothes were soaked through, and exhaustion weighed on every muscle in his body. Another 16-hour shift at the Seoul Space Research Institute had drained him completely. All he wanted was to collapse on his couch and maybe heat up some leftover rice. He pushed open the door and immediately knew something was wrong. The living room looked like a tornado had torn through it. Books were scattered across the floor, their pages bent and crumpled. The coffee table was overturned, and his sister's laptop lay on the ground with its screen cracked. A chair was knocked over near the window, and the curtains hung at odd angles, as if someone had grabbed them while falling. "Hai-Jin?" Jiwan called out, his voice cracking with sudden fear. He dropped his bag and rushed through the apartment. "Hai-Jin." Her bedroom door was open. The bed was unmade, which was normal for his messy younger sister, but her phone was still plugged into the charger on the nightstand. Hai-Jin never went anywhere without her phone. Never. Jiwan's hands trembled as he pulled out his own phone and dialed her number. He heard the ringtone coming from her room. His stomach dropped. He checked every room twice, calling her name until his throat was raw. The bathroom was empty. The kitchen was empty. She was gone. Jiwan collapsed against the wall and tried to think clearly despite the panic flooding his mind. He was a scientist. He needed to observe, to gather evidence, to understand what had happened. But this was his little sister, the girl he had practically raised after their father died. The brilliant university student who wanted to study xenobiology, even though aliens probably didn't exist. He called the police. 2 officers arrived within an hour. They walked through the apartment, took notes, and asked questions that felt pointless. "When did you last see her? Did she have any enemies? Was she depressed? Could she have run away?" "She wouldn't run away," Jiwan insisted. "And she wouldn't leave her phone. Something happened here." The older officer looked sympathetic, but not convinced. "Sir, most missing person cases resolve themselves within 48 hours. Young people often need space. Maybe she went to stay with a friend. Look at this place." Jiwan gestured at the chaos around them. "Does this look like someone who left voluntarily?" The younger officer was examining the walls with a flashlight. "There's no sign of forced entry. No blood. No evidence of a struggle beyond the mess, which could have happened any time." After they left, promising to file a report and keep him updated, Jiwan called Yoonji. She was Hai-Jin's roommate and best friend from university. "She didn't come to my place?" Yoonji said, her voice tight with worry. "I saw her yesterday afternoon at the library. She seemed fine, normal. She said she was going home to study. If she contacts you, tell her to call me immediately," Jiwan said. "Please, Yoonji. I'm really worried." "I will. I promise." Jiwan barely slept that night. He lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, jumping at every sound. When dawn finally came, he called in sick to work and began his own investigation. He was an astrophysicist, not a detective, but he had tools the police didn't. He retrieved his portable electromagnetic field detector from his work bag and began scanning the apartment. What he found made his blood run cold. The entire apartment was saturated with unusual electromagnetic readings. They were strongest near the window, where the curtains were disturbed, and in the center of the living room. The patterns didn't match anything natural. They weren't from power lines or electronics. They were something else entirely. Jiwan spent the next 3 days documenting everything. He took measurements, photographs, and samples. He brought in equipment from the institute, claiming he needed it for a personal project. His colleague Minho helped without asking too many questions at first dot, but on the 4th day, Minho sat him down and said, "You need to tell me what's going on. You look terrible. You're not sleeping. You're bringing institute equipment home. Talk to me. Ji-won showed him the readings. Minho studied them for a long time, his expression growing more confused and concerned. These don't make sense. What could cause patterns like this? I don't know, Ji-won admitted. But they appeared the night Haijin disappeared. You think they're connected? I know they are. The police investigation went nowhere. After 2 weeks, they told Ji-won that without evidence of foul play, there wasn't much more they could do. Haijin was an adult. She had the right to leave if she wanted. They couldn't force her to come home. She didn't leave, Ji-won said for the 100th time. But he was shouting at people who had already moved on to other cases. Weeks turned into months. Ji-won's life became a blur of work and obsessive research. He analyzed the electromagnetic readings every night, running them through every database he could access. He learned more about electromagnetic phenomena than he ever thought possible. He corresponded with scientists around the world, carefully describing the readings without mentioning their connection to his sister's disappearance. No one had any answers. Minho watched his friend deteriorate with growing alarm. Ji-won lost weight. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. He stopped attending social gatherings and barely spoke to anyone except when discussing his research. You need to accept that she might not come back, Minho said gently one evening after work. I know that's horrible to hear, but you're destroying yourself. I can't give up on her, Ji-won replied, staring at his computer screen filled with data. She's my sister. She's all the family I have left. She wouldn't want you to ruin your life over this. I'm not ruining my life. I'm trying to find her. But deep down, Ji-won knew Minho was right. He was barely functioning. His performance at work had declined so much that his supervisor had called him in for a concerned conversation. He was surviving on coffee and determination, and both were running out. 6 months after Haijin disappeared, Ji-won came home late again from another fruitless day of research. He unlocked his apartment door and stepped inside, barely noticing the familiar emptiness anymore. Then he heard a voice that made his heart stop. Hello, brother. He looked up, and there she was. Haijin stood in his living room, alive and healthy and smiling. She looked exactly the same, except for something different in her eyes. Something older and wiser than before. And standing beside her was something that definitely wasn't human. The being was tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Its features were humanoid, but otherworldly, with large eyes that held depths Ji-won couldn't comprehend. It wore clothing that looked like liquid metal flowing across its body. Ji-won's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the floor, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. It's okay, Haijin said, moving toward him. I know this is a shock, but I'm safe. I've been safe this whole time. What? Ji-won's voice came out as a whisper. What is happening? The alien being stepped forward and spoke in perfect Korean, its voice like music. My name is Thera. I apologize for the distress my actions have caused you. I am here to explain everything. Ji-won looked at his sister, then at the alien, and back at his sister. 6 months of anguish, fear, and desperate searching crashed over him all at once. Haijin knelt beside him and took his hand. I have so much to tell you, and you're not going to believe any of it. Ji-won sat on his couch, a cup of tea in his trembling hands that Haijin had made for him. He hadn't touched it. He couldn't stop staring at the alien standing calmly in his living room as if this was completely normal. Thera had seated herself in the chair across from him. Moving with an inhuman grace, it was both beautiful and unsettling. Her luminescent skin pulsed gently with light that seemed to come from within. Every few seconds, her form would shimmer slightly, as if she wasn't entirely solid. Are you ready to listen? Haijin asked gently. She sat beside him, looking healthier and more confident than he'd ever seen her. Jiwan nodded because he couldn't form words yet. I should start with the truth about who I am, Thera said. Her voice was strange, seeming to come from everywhere at once. 26 years ago, I came to Earth as part of a research expedition. My people, the Valorians, have been observing humanity for centuries. We don't interfere, but we study. We learn. Why? Jiwan finally managed to ask. Because you fascinate us. Your species is unique in ways you don't yet understand. Thera leaned forward slightly. During my time here, I fell in love with a human man. Your father. Jiwan's cup slipped from his hands. Haijin caught it before it could spill. That's impossible, he whispered. I am Haijin's biological mother, Thera continued. Our species are compatible in rare cases. Haijin is what we call a bridge child, born of two worlds. When my mission ended, I was forced to leave. Our laws forbade me from taking a hybrid child back to Valorian space. I had to make an impossible choice. Haijin squeezed her brother's hand. Dad never told you because he wanted to protect me. He thought if people knew, I'd become some kind of experiment or target. Mom had to watch me from a distance my whole life. This is insane, Jiwan said, but even as he spoke, pieces started falling into place. Haijin's unusual intelligence, her fascination with space and alien life, the way she sometimes seemed to know things she couldn't possibly know. Why now? Why take her 6 months ago? Thera's expression grew somber. Because I saw humanity approaching a critical point. Your species stands at a crossroads. Within the next century, you will either destroy yourselves through war and environmental collapse, or you will unite and reach for the stars. I couldn't watch my daughter die with her planet if the worst came to pass. So you kidnapped her? Jiwan's anger was starting to break through the shock. I saved her, Thera corrected. And I gave her a choice. She chose to come with me to learn about her heritage and her mother's people. Haijin turned to face him fully. I know you were worried. I know you suffered, and I'm so sorry for that. But Jiwan, I've seen things you can't imagine. I've been to worlds light years away. I've learned about civilizations millions of years old. I've discovered abilities I didn't know I had because of my hybrid nature. You could have left a note, Jiwan said weakly. The transition couldn't work that way. The technology that transported me creates the electromagnetic signatures you detected. If I'd tried to leave any message, it would have been destroyed in the energy field. Jiwan's scientific mind latched on to that detail. I knew those readings were connected. I tried to tell everyone, but no one believed me. You were right, Thera said with something like approval in her voice. You have a sharp mind. That's good. We're going to need sharp minds for what comes next. What do you mean? Haijin and Thera exchanged a look that made Jiwan's stomach tighten with fresh anxiety. There's more, Haijin said. Much more. And this is the part that's going to sound completely impossible. Over the next 2 hours, they explained. Thera told him about the Valorian Coalition, an alliance of 47 advanced species that spanned multiple galaxies. She described worlds where cities floated in the clouds and oceans that existed in dimensions humans couldn't perceive. She explained technology that made humanity's greatest achievements look like children's toys. Then she told him about the Voidborn. They appeared 300 years ago in Coalition space, Thera said, her light dimming with remembered grief. No one knows where they came from. They don't communicate. They don't negotiate. They simply consume. They destroy civilizations completely, leaving nothing but dead worlds behind. How many worlds have they destroyed? Jiwan asked. 42 Coalition worlds. Hundreds of billions of lives. Thera's voice was heavy with loss. We've been fighting them for 3 centuries, and we're losing. Jiwan struggled to process numbers that large. But you're so advanced. How can you be losing to them? Because we're too advanced, Heijin said. That's the problem. Mom's people and the other coalition species, they've evolved beyond aggression. They've optimized everything. Their strategies are perfect according to all logical analysis. Their technology is superior. But the Voidborn adapt to perfection. They exploit predictability. The coalition has forgotten how to fight with chaos, Thera added. How to take risks that make no logical sense. How to be unpredictable and irrational. These are traits we evolved beyond millions of years ago. A cold realization was forming in Jiwan's mind. You're saying humans still have those traits. Not just still have them, Heijin said, leaning forward with intensity. You excel at them. Humanity's entire history is filled with impossible victories, won through crazy risks and illogical decisions. You fight dirty. You refuse to surrender even when mathematics says you should. You improvise in ways that would never occur to a species that thinks purely logically. Jiwan stood and walked to the window, looking out at Seoul's lights. Normal. People were down there living normal lives, completely unaware that aliens existed and were apparently losing an intergalactic war. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because in 3 days, representatives from several Earth governments will be meeting with coalition ambassadors, Thera said. First contact is about to become public knowledge. But before that happens, I wanted to tell you the truth. You deserve to know. First contact, Jiwan repeated. That's going to change everything. Yes, Thera agreed. Humanity will have to make a choice about its place in the galaxy. Jiwan turned back to face them. And what choice is that? Heijin stood and walked over to him. That's what we need to talk about tomorrow, after you've had time to process this. Because the coalition isn't just making contact to say hello. They're here to ask for something, Jiwan said, understanding dawning. Yes, Thera confirmed. Something that's going to shock your entire world. The next morning, Jiwan woke up convinced it had all been a dream. Then he walked into his living room and found Thera standing by the window, her form catching the sunlight in impossible ways. Good morning, she said. Your sister is still sleeping. The transition back to Earth's atmosphere is tiring for hybrid physiology. Jiwan made coffee with shaking hands. He'd barely slept, his mind spinning with everything he'd learned. Aliens were real. His sister was half alien. An intergalactic war was happening. It was too much. His phone buzzed. It was Mino. Where are you? His friend's voice came through urgently. Turn on the news. Any channel. Right now. Jiwan grabbed the remote and switched on the television. Every channel showed the same thing. A massive spacecraft hovering over Geneva, Switzerland. It was beautiful and terrifying. A structure that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal shaped into impossible geometries. The world leaders are gathering, Thera said calmly. The coalition wanted to make our presence undeniable before formal contact begins. Jiwan's phone exploded with messages. His supervisor, his colleagues, his friends, even distant relatives. Everyone was seeing it. Everyone was terrified and amazed in equal measure. This is really happening, he whispered. It is, Thera confirmed. And within hours, I'll be standing before your world's leaders to make our request. Heijin emerged from the guest room, looking tired but determined. How's the world taking? It badly and well, depending on who you ask, Jiwan said, scrolling through news feeds. There are celebrations in some places, riots in others. Religious leaders are having emergency conferences. The stock markets have been suspended. It's chaos. Chaos, Thera said thoughtfully. That's appropriate, given what we're about to ask. They ate breakfast together in surreal normalcy, an alien and 2 humans sharing rice and soup while the world fell apart outside. Then Thera stood and said, It's time. Jiwan, I would like you to accompany us to Geneva. Me? Why? Because you're Haijin's family. Because you're a respected scientist. And because you deserve to be there when humanity learns the truth. 2 hours later, Jiwan found himself on a Valorian transport craft that moved faster than anything humanity had ever built. The journey from Seoul to Geneva took 12 minutes. The meeting was held in a specially prepared chamber beneath the main coalition ship. Representatives from every major nation on Earth had gathered, along with scientists, military officials, and diplomats. The room buzzed with nervous energy and countless languages. Ji-won recognized several faces from news broadcasts. Counselor Dae-yeon was there representing South Korea, looking calm despite the circumstances. Ambassador Seo-jin from the UN stood near the front, his expression carefully neutral. Then the coalition representatives entered, and the room fell silent. Thera led them, accompanied by 5 other beings from different species. Each was unique and alien in their own way. One seemed to be made of crystalline structures that chimed softly as it moved. Another flowed more than walked, its body constantly shifting. A third had wings that looked like they were made of pure light. People of Earth, Thera began, her voice filling the chamber without seeming loud. We come before you not as conquerors or gods, but as neighbors in a vast galaxy who desperately need your help. For the next hour, she explained everything. The coalition, the Voidborn, the war that was being lost. Every word was translated simultaneously into every language through technology. It seemed like magic. Then she made the request. We ask that humanity send military advisors, strategists, and soldiers to help train coalition forces and lead operations against the Voidborn. We need your unpredictability, your creativity in desperate situations, your willingness to take impossible risks. We need the chaos that makes humanity both dangerous and magnificent. The room erupted. You want us to fight your war? A general from the United States shouted. You're more advanced than us in every way, and you're asking primitives for help. A European diplomat demanded. How do we know this isn't a trick to steal our people? Someone else called out Dr. Borum. A Korean scientist Jiwan recognized from academic conferences stood up. This makes no logical sense. If you're losing to these Voidborn with superior technology and intelligence, what makes you think humans can help? We can barely manage our own planet. Thera waited for the chaos to die down. I understand your skepticism. Let me show you something. The center of the room lit up with a holographic display. It showed a battle simulation between coalition forces and the Voidborn. The coalition forces moved with perfect coordination and employed brilliant strategies. They still lost. Then the simulation reset, but this time human observers were added to the coalition command structure. The simulation showed humans suggesting tactics that looked insane. Feigned retreats that violated protocols, psychological warfare that seemed pointless against a hive mind, ambush strategies that required abandoning defensive positions. The coalition forces followed these suggestions. They won. This is just a simulation, General Tai-yang from the Korean military said. It proves nothing. Then let us conduct live training exercises, Thera offered. Select your best military minds. Put them against coalition forces in war games. See what happens. Haijin stepped forward beside her mother. I've lived with the coalition for 6 months. I've seen what they can do and what they can't do. They're not trying to trick us or use us. They're desperate, and they're offering us something incredible in return. What could you possibly offer us? Ambassador Seo-jin asked. Thera's form brightened. Technology that will solve your energy crisis. Medical knowledge that will cure diseases and extend lifespans. Clean matter conversion that will end hunger. Access to the galactic community and resources beyond measure. All we ask is that you help us survive. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Dr. Borum spoke again, her voice quieter now. You're offering us everything, our entire future, in exchange for helping you fight. Yes, Thera said simply, because if the Voidborn continue unchecked, they'll eventually reach Earth. Help us now, and you'll be saving yourselves as well. Jiwan watched his sister standing confidently beside her alien mother, addressing the most powerful people on Earth. She'd gone from a university student to a bridge between worlds in just 6 months. How long do we have to decide? Counselor Daehyun asked. The Coalition Council will return in 3 days for your answer, Thera replied. We hope you'll choose to join us. The galaxy needs humanity. Even if you don't realize it yet, you need the galaxy too. As the meeting ended and leaders began urgent discussions in clusters, Ji-won felt someone touch his shoulder. It was Minho, who'd somehow gotten clearance to attend. This is insane, Minho said, his eyes wide. Your sister is half alien. Aliens are real. They want us to fight in a space war. I think I'm going to pass out. Join the club, Ji-won replied. I've had 24 hours to process this. You've had one. What do you think we should do? Ji-won looked at Haijin laughing with Thera, and then at the holographic images of destroyed worlds still floating in the center of the room. He thought about humanity's history of pulling victory from certain defeat. He thought about the impossible becoming possible. I think, he said slowly, that maybe humanity has been preparing for this moment our entire existence. Every war we've fought, every impossible odd we've beaten, every time we've refused to give up when logic said we should. Maybe it was all leading here. That's either the most inspiring thing I've ever heard, Minho said, or the craziest. With humanity, Ji-won replied with a slight smile. It's usually both. 3 days of chaos followed the announcement. Earth had never experienced anything like it. Every government, organization, and individual had an opinion on the Coalition's request. News networks ran non-stop coverage. Social media exploded with theories, arguments, and fears. Ji-won watched it all from the temporary quarters that Thera had arranged for them near Geneva. World leaders were meeting constantly, negotiating terms and arguing about what humanity should do. Some saw opportunity. This is our chance to leap forward 1,000 years in technology, one enthusiastic spokesperson declared on television. That others saw danger. They're trying to recruit soldiers for their war. Our people will die in space. A concerned politician warned. Religious leaders debated whether this changed humanity's place in creation. Scientists could barely contain their excitement about the possibility of studying alien technology. Military officials were split between those who saw it as humanity's finest hour and those who saw it as a trap. Through it all, Haijin worked tirelessly as a translator and cultural bridge, explaining human concerns to the Coalition and Coalition technology to humans. Ji-won watched his sister with pride and amazement. She'd grown so much in 6 months. On the 4th day, the UN Security Council reached a decision. They would allow a trial program. Volunteers from various nations' special forces and strategic divisions would undergo training with coalition forces. If the results showed promise, they would consider a larger commitment. Thera accepted these terms gracefully, though Ji-won suspected she'd hoped for more. The call for volunteers went out globally. They needed soldiers, pilots, strategists, and tactical analysts. The requirements were strict: psychological stability, creative thinking, and a willingness to risk everything. Thousands applied. Hundreds were selected for initial screening. Among them was Commander Yuna, a special forces officer from the Korean military with a legendary reputation. She'd served in 3 combat zones and had a gift for unconventional tactics. When interviewed about why she volunteered, her answer was simple: because someone has to go first. Another selectee surprised everyone: a civilian named Nari, who worked as a tactical analyst for a gaming company. She'd won every major strategy game competition in Asia for 5 years running. She had no military experience, but her mind worked in ways that consistently broke conventional solutions. "You're sending gamers to fight an alien war?" one news anchor asked incredulously when the selections were announced. "We're sending people who think differently," Ambassador Seok-jing replied. "That's what the coalition needs." Ji-won watched the first group of 50 human volunteers board coalition transport bound for a training facility on one of Jupiter's moons. Thera's people had converted it into a forward base, using technology to create breathable atmosphere and gravity. "I wish I could go with them," Haijin said wistfully. "You're needed here," Ji-won reminded her. "Someone has to help our people understand what's happening." But secretly, Ji-won felt the same pull. His whole life had been spent studying the stars from a distance. Now the stars were offering him a chance to make a real difference. 2 weeks later, the first reports came back from the training facility. The human volunteers faced skepticism from coalition forces immediately. Many alien species looked at these short-lived primates and saw nothing but weakness. Why would the coalition leadership waste time training such primitive creatures? Commander Yuna described their first meeting in a video call with Earth Command. "We walked into the training center, and these beings, they looked at us like we were insects. One of them, a warrior from a species called the Korath, said we wouldn't last 5 minutes in a real fight." "How did you respond?" the interviewer asked. Yuna grinned. "We challenged them to a training exercise. Right then and there. The first combat simulation was supposed to be a simple introduction to coalition warfare tactics. 2 teams, basic weapons, standard battlefield scenario. The coalition team consisted of experienced Korath, soldiers who'd been fighting the Voidborn for decades. The human team was Commander Yuna's squad of 12 Special Forces operators. The Korath were bigger, stronger, and faster. They had better weapons and superior tactics refined over millennia. They should have won easily. They lost in 8 minutes. Yuna's team didn't fight fair. They ambushed during what the Korath considered a standard negotiation period. They feigned a retreat that led the Korath into a trap. They used psychological tactics to make the Korath second-guess themselves. They broke every rule of engagement that the coalition considered proper warfare. The Korath commander was furious, Yuna reported. He said we cheated. I told him the Voidborn don't follow rules either. That statement rippled through the coalition forces present. It was a truth they'd forgotten in their millions of years of civilized warfare. More exercises followed. Nari, the gaming analyst, was put in charge of designing battle scenarios. She created simulations that violated every principle of coalition military doctrine. Her scenarios were chaotic, unpredictable, and full of what the coalition called impossible variables. The coalition forces hated them at first. These scenarios felt wrong, disorganized, and illogical. But when they followed the human advisor's suggestions and embraced the chaos, they won again and again. A coalition officer named Elder Sunny, a wise being who'd commanded fleets for 300 years, observed these exercises with growing interest. She'd initially opposed the human initiative, considering it desperate and foolish. But after watching humans train alongside her soldiers for 3 weeks, her opinion changed. They fight like the galaxy is ending, she said in a report to the Coalition Council. Because for them, it always is. Their lives are so short that every battle might be their last, so they hold nothing back. They take risks that should fail, but somehow succeed. They refuse to accept defeat, even when the mathematics say they should. This is what we've lost. The breakthrough came during a large-scale training exercise involving 6 coalition squadrons and 15 human advisors. The scenario simulated a Voidborn attack on a supply depot. Following traditional coalition tactics, the defenders would lose after holding out for 4 hours. It was inevitable, according to all projections. The human advisors suggested something different, controlled chaos. Instead of defending the depot, they suggested deliberately creating confusion. They recommended fake retreats, false supply caches, misinformation sent through channels the Void-Born would intercept, and coordinated randomness that would disrupt the Void-Born's hive mind coordination. It was insane. It violated every principle of coalition warfare. It worked perfectly. The simulated Void-Born forces couldn't adapt to the chaos. Their hive mind, which excelled at countering perfect coordination, struggled with deliberate disorder. They won the exercise after 3 hours with minimal casualties. Elder Sun He stood before the assembled coalition and human forces after the exercise. Her ancient eyes held something humanity hadn't seen from the coalition yet: hope. For 300 years, we've been losing this war because we forgot how to be illogical, she said. We optimized ourselves into predictability. These humans, these short-lived beautiful chaos, they've reminded us that sometimes the wrong answer is the right answer. Back on Earth, Ji-Wan watched the training reports with Minho and Hai-Jin. The results were undeniable. Human unpredictability was working. They're actually going to do it, Minho said in wonder. Humanity is going to fight in an alien war. Not just fight, Hai-Jin corrected. We're going to teach them how to win. The UN called for more volunteers. This time, 20,000 applied. The trial program was expanded. More training facilities were established. Human tactical thinking was being integrated into coalition military doctrine at every level. And slowly, impossibly, hope began to spread through the coalition. The Void-Born were still winning the war, but for the first time in 3 centuries, the coalition believed they might have a chance. Ji-Wan received a message from Commander Yuna. We're preparing for our first real operation against the Void-Born. Tell Earth that their people are ready. We're going to show the galaxy what humanity can do. That night, Ji-Wan made a decision. He called his supervisor at the Institute and requested an indefinite leave of absence. Why? His supervisor asked. Because I'm volunteering, Ji-Wan replied. My sister showed me the galaxy. Now it's my turn to help save it. Hai-Jin hugged him tightly when he told her. I knew you would. You've always been the brave one. No, Ji-Wan said, looking at his remarkable sister. You were brave. I'm just following your example. Within a week, he was on a transport to Jupiter's moon, ready to join the war effort. Minho came with him, unable to let his friend face this alone as Earth fell away behind them. Ji-Wan looked out at the stars and thought about how much had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been a lonely scientist searching desperately for his missing sister. Now he was a soldier heading to war in space, fighting to save species he'd never met, using humanity's greatest weakness, its beautiful chaos, as its greatest weapon. The impossible had become possible. And this was only the beginning. The Coalition warship Eternal Dawn hung in space like a massive blade, its hull reflecting starlight from 3 nearby suns. Inside its briefing room, Commander Yuna stood before a mixed group of humans and aliens, preparing for humanity's first real combat operation against the Void-Born. Ji-Wan sat near the back, still adjusting to life aboard an alien vessel. He'd been training for 3 weeks now, learning coalition weapons and tactics while teaching them human strategic thinking. His role was as a tactical analyst working alongside Nari, who'd become something of a legend among coalition forces for her unconventional scenario designs. Our target is a Void-Born stronghold on the 3rd moon of Kelto 7, Yuna explained, gesturing at the holographic display. The moon was dark and scarred, covered in the strange geometric structures the Void-Born built. Intelligence suggests it's a forward base they're using to launch attacks on nearby coalition worlds. A Korath warrior named Thek, who'd become one of humanity's strongest advocates after losing to them in training, spoke up. Standard coalition assault tactics would require 3 times our current forces and would result in 70% casualties. That's why we're not using standard tactics, Yuna replied with a slight smile. We're using controlled chaos. The plan was audacious to the point of madness. Instead of a coordinated assault, they would attack from multiple directions with deliberately uncoordinated timing. They would send false signals to confuse the Voidborn's hive mind. They would feign retreats at random intervals. They would create disorder that humans thrived in, but that would disrupt the Voidborn's perfect coordination. Elder Sunny, Hood, insisted on participating in this first operation, nodded her approval. This would have been called cowardly and dishonorable by coalition standards 50 years ago. Now it might be what saves us. The fleet consisted of 12 coalition ships and 1 modified human vessel that Earth had sent up as a show of commitment. Aboard that ship was Ji-hoon, a cocky pilot from the Korean Air Force who'd been selected for his ability to fly in ways that made his instructors nervous. I still think you're all crazy, Ji-hoon said over the comm channel, but I'm the good kind of crazy, so let's do this. The approach to Kelto 7 took 6 hours. Ji-won spent that time reviewing tactical displays with Nari, identifying patterns in how the Voidborn responded to threats. They're beautiful in a terrible way, Nari observed, studying the data. Pure efficiency. No waste, no hesitation, but that's also their weakness. They can't imagine chaos because they've never needed to. Can we really beat them? Ji-won asked quietly. Nari looked at him with surprising seriousness. I don't know, but I know we have to try. And I know that humanity has been beating impossible odds since we climbed down from the trees and decided to fight everything bigger than us. The attack began at dawn on the moon's strange double sunrise. Coalition forces came from the east, while human-advised squadrons approached from unexpected angles. The coordination was deliberately imperfect, creating what Yuna called organized confusion. The Voidborn responded exactly as predicted. Their hive mind tried to optimize defenses against the main coalition assault, leaving gaps where they expected no threats. Human-led squadrons exploited those gaps ruthlessly. Ji-hoon's squadron of mixed human and alien fighters encountered Voidborn interceptors that moved with mechanical precision. The alien pilots fought them using perfect tactical formations that should have worked. They were being methodically destroyed. Break formation. Ji-hoon shouted over the comm. Everyone just scatter and improvise. That's against protocols, his Korath wingmate protested. Protocols are getting us killed. Trust me. What happened? Next would be studied in military academies across the coalition for centuries. Ji-hoon's squadron abandoned all formation discipline and fought as individuals, each pilot using their own instincts and creativity. The coordinated chaos was impossible for the Voidborn to counter. Their interceptors, designed to fight perfect. Formations couldn't adapt to 12 pilots all acting unpredictably. Ji-hoon pulled a maneuver so reckless it made his flight computer scream warnings at him. He flew directly at a Voidborn ship, waited until the last second, then spun his craft in a way that violated 3 laws of physics as humanity understood. Them but worked perfectly with the coalition's inertial dampeners. He missed the Voidborn ship by centimeters. His wingmate, following his lead purely on instinct, fired through the gap Ji-hoon had created. The Voidborn ship exploded. That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen, his Korath wingmate gasped. But did you die? Ji-hoon shot back. No. Then it was smart enough. On the ground, Commander Yuna led a mixed assault team into the Voidborn stronghold. The interior was a maze of dark corridors and geometric chambers it seemed designed to disorient. The Voidborn were waiting, their hive mind coordinating perfect ambushes. But Yuna's team didn't advance like a military unit. They moved like a mob, seemingly disorganized, but actually following a fluid plan that changed every few seconds based on whatever felt right. When the Voidborn set an ambush, the humans weren't where they were supposed to be. When the Voidborn tried to surround them, the humans had already scattered to new positions. Vec fought beside a human soldier named Private Deho, a young man from Bazan who'd been a street fighter before joining the military. Vec watched in amazement as Daho took down a Voidborn warrior using a technique that was equal parts martial arts, desperation, and pure stubbornness. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Vec asked. "I didn't learn it," Deho replied, breathing hard. "I'm making it up as I go." That phrase, "making it up as I go," became the unofficial motto of the operation dot in the command center. Jiwan and Nari coordinated the chaos, sending orders that were really more like suggestions. They'd learned that humans fought better when given objectives rather than specific instructions. "The Voidborn are concentrating forces on the East Corridor," Nari reported. "Then tell our teams to hit them from the west, north, and through the ceiling," Jiwan replied. "There's no entrance through the ceiling. Then make one." 2 minutes later, a human demolitions expert named Somin blew a hole through 3 floors and dropped a strike team directly behind the Voidborn concentration. The Voidborn, who'd never encountered an enemy that would destroy structural integrity for tactical advantage, were completely unprepared. The battle lasted 4 hours. By any logical measure, the coalition forces should have lost. They were outnumbered, fighting on enemy territory, using tactics that shouldn't work. They won. When the last Voidborn defender fell and the stronghold was secured, a strange silence fell over the comm channels. Coalition forces couldn't quite believe what had happened. They just won a major victory against an enemy that had been unstoppable for 3 centuries. Elder Suni stood in the center of the captured stronghold, her ancient form surrounded by exhausted soldiers from a dozen species. Humans sat beside aliens, all of them covered in wounds and triumph. "This changes everything," she said simply. News of the victory spread across coalition space like wildfire. For the first time in 300 years, forces fighting the Voidborn had taken one of their strongholds. The victory was small in the grand scale of the war, but its psychological impact was immeasurable. Hope, that fragile human emotion the coalition had nearly forgotten, began to spread. Back on Earth, the news was received with a mixture of celebration and disbelief. Humanity had actually helped win an alien battle. People who'd been skeptical about the whole arrangement suddenly became believers. More volunteers lined up to join the coalition forces. G1 stood in the observation deck of the Eternal Dawn, looking out at the stars. Minho joined him, limping slightly from a wound he'd taken during the battle. "We actually did it," Minho said in wonder. "Crazy, stupid, illogical humans helped advanced aliens win a battle." "Not despite being crazy and illogical," Jiwan corrected. "Because of it." Haijin's face appeared on a comm screen nearby. She was back on Earth, addressing the United Nations about expanding humanity's role in the coalition. "Today proved what my mother always believed," she told the assembled leaders. "Humanity's value to the galaxy isn't in spite of our flaws, but because of them. We're reckless, emotional, and unpredictable. We refuse to accept defeat. We improvise and adapt and survive against impossible odds. The galaxy forgot how to do these things. We never learned to forget." The UN voted to commit more resources to the war effort. 20 coalition training facilities were established throughout the solar system. Thousands more humans would join the fight, but more importantly, the coalition itself began to change. Alien species started studying human military history, trying to understand how such a primitive species had survived so long against superior enemies. They discovered stories of battles won through pure stubbornness, of strategies that succeeded because they were too stupid to fail, of individuals who changed history by refusing to give up when all logic said they should. They began to relearn lessons they'd forgotten in their millions of years of evolution. Elder Sunny requested that Jiwan joined her in her private chambers. She was one of the oldest beings in the coalition, and her wisdom was legendary. "Your species frightens us," she admitted. "Not because you're dangerous, but because you remind us of what we used to be. Wild, unpredictable, driven by passion as much as logic. Is that a bad thing?" Jiwan asked. "No," she replied. "It's what we need to survive. The Voidborn are the perfect enemy for perfect civilizations. But against chaos, against beautiful human chaos, they're vulnerable." She touched his arm with her aged appendage. "Humanity will save us. But more than that, you'll remind us how to save ourselves. That's the real gift you bring to the galaxy." 6 months after the first contact, the war against the Voidborn was still far from won. But for the first time in 3 centuries, the coalition was winning battles. Human tactical thinking was being integrated into every level of military operations. Mixed human-alien units were forming bonds that transcended species. Jiwan stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, preparing for another mission. Around him worked humans and aliens together, the best of both worlds combining into something new. His sister appeared on a channel from Earth, standing beside their alien mother Thera. Behind them, Jiwan could see representatives from both Earth and the coalition working together on technology exchange programs. "How does it feel?" Hyjin asked him. "Being humanity's representative to the stars?" "Terrifying and amazing," Jiwan admitted. "How does it feel being the bridge between 2 worlds?" "The same," she replied with a smile. Thera stepped forward, her luminescent form bright with emotion. "I brought Hyjin to my world to save her from Earth's potential destruction. Instead, she showed me that Earth didn't need saving. It needed to save others. I came seeking to protect one child. I found a species that would protect the galaxy." Commander Yuna's voice came over the ship-wide comms. "All personnel, prepare for jump to combat zone. We've got another Voidborn position to take, and I want everyone remembering what we've learned. Be unpredictable. Be creative. Be human." As the ship prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, Jiwan thought about how far they'd come. 6 months ago, he'd been a desperate man searching for his missing sister. Now he was part of something larger than he'd ever imagined. Humanity had reached the stars not as conquerors or supplicants, but as partners. They'd found their place in the galaxy, not through superior technology or wisdom, but through the very traits that had always made them both dangerous and magnificent, not their refusal to give up. Their creative chaos. Their fierce, irrational hope, not the stars stretched out before the eternal dawn as it jumped into the unknown. Somewhere out there, the Voidborn were waiting. But they'd never faced anything like humanity before, and that was going to make all the difference.